to thank you all for coming, and we're expecting a large crowd. So first, I want to start with just a couple of housekeeping things. One, we are muting everybody from the beginning. So when it comes time, if you have something you want to say, there are two things I'm going to ask you to do. One is if you don't know, if you look at the react button on the bottom where there's a little heart, if you click on it once, you'll see it'll box will pop up and you'll see where it says raise hand. And you'll want to click on that so that you get a little hand figure in your box, because that will take you up to the first screen. Because right now we have 52 people, which means we're across three different screens. We had 95 people register, so we may well go to four screens. So if you simply raise your hand, or even if you unmuted and start talking, we wouldn't necessarily know where you are. So the smoothest protocol for tonight will be if you'll hit that raised hand, it'll bring you to the front screen, and then when I have a pause, I can call on you. You'll need to unmute to speak because everyone's muted at this point in time, and then we'll go on. This is very much designed to be a town hall, so it will not be all one way. There will be opportunity to have some comments as well as questions from you all as we get started here. I want to start, also it will give folks a few more time. I am curious to see who we have here in the room as far as what your experience is. Yes, Douglas. Or were you just testing? All right, good. You found it. Woo! All right, so I'm going to launch a poll here, and it will provide you an opportunity to share where you are. If you're a layperson, are you brand new to Vestry in the first term, but you finished year one, so now you've oh, now I kind of know what I think I'm supposed to be doing. And then if you're a clergy person, less than 5 years, more than 5 years. So we'll go ahead there. Go ahead and click whichever button fits best for you. So again, if you haven't had a chance to take the poll, looks like there might be a few folks here. All right, we'll go ahead and that's close, not quite everybody close enough. Here are the poll results to give us a general sense. So we had 55 of folks participate, and so pretty even spread between folks newer to Vestry and folks who have some experience. So that's wonderful. I'm going to look forward to having those of you who have years in Vestry share some of your experience, as well as anyone sort of express questions here. So, and Ellen, we'll imagine that you have enough experience with standing committee. You definitely fit in one of those categories if we just expanded them. Let's go ahead and begin with prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give thanks for the gift of your church. I give thanks for those who throughout the Episcopal Church are beginning a new year serving as wardens, clergy, and vestry members, treasurers, and clerks, offering their time, their gifts to the leadership of their local congregation. I pray that your Spirit will bless them this year. Help them as they deal with tough issues, as they envision the possible and bring it into reality. May they work together, and in all that we do, may we give honor and glory to you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So in order to talk about what's the role of the vestry, it's important to understand how we in the Episcopal Church understand authority and responsibility. How do we organize ourselves as church? And so I want to share a document with you here. In the Episcopal Church, we understand that all authority is given to us in baptism. That is the starting point for the conversation of where does authority and responsibility lie. And what we do, we are a hierarchical church, but as we work through this, I'll show you how the authority and responsibility start with baptism. And in the sense of a traditional hierarchical structure, they get handed up and then they come back down, right? So there's a dynamic relationship. All authority starts in the beginning with baptism. What you all did, the reason you all became vestry members is when the baptized body of body of Christ, the congregation came together, they elected you to be vestry members. They elected you to be leaders of the congregation. You weren't appointed by the priest, you weren't appointed by the bishop. It was the assembled body of the church that invited and empowered you to serve as leaders for the congregation for this year. And through the canons and bylaws of the church, they have instilled in you authority and responsibility for the leadership of the congregation. Now, as the lay members, if you were on vestry as a lay member at the time of calling a rector, you are the ones, one of the canonical responsibilities of vestry is to elect the rector. Again, the rector is not appointed by someone else, not appointed by a predecessor or the bishop, but it is the vestry empowered by the congregation to elect the rector. In some traditions, the whole congregation elects the senior pastor. But in our tradition, it is one of the authorities, one of the responsibilities that's given to the vestry is to elect a rector. At the same time, when you gathered at your annual meeting, you also elected lay delegates to diocesan convention. You decided who was going to represent the congregation at diocesan convention. Right? And so when you look at this second sort of tier here or bubble, you've got diocesan convention. Diocesan convention has, we would say, two houses, the canonical clergy and the lay delegates representing the congregations. The lay delegates that get through election at annual meeting, and the clergy, there are two ways that you become a priest who has canonical residence in the Diocese of the Great Lakes or any diocese. One of them is that you got called as rector by your wardens in vestry, or as an assisting clergy, the rector who was elected by vestry has called someone to come serve, right? But all that, again, flows from the congregation itself. The other thing is that you went through the ordination process in this diocese. And so you were lifted up by a vestry, you were ordained by a bishop. And so, again, the bishop doesn't simply appoint priests and make priests on their own. It takes lay involvement, not only by the sponsoring congregation, but the standing committee, which is made up of priests and lay members who've been elected at diocesan convention. They have to consent to anyone being ordained in this diocese as a priest or deacon. So everyone who's at diocesan convention in some way has gained that position directly, indirectly, because of decisions made by the congregation. And for anything to be passed, any sort of canonical change, any bylaws, the budget of the diocese, that happens at convention. One of the things that happens every 3 years, we did it this past year at diocesan convention then, is we elect deputies who go to general convention. General convention is the highest authority within the Episcopal Church. They're the ones who set out the canons approve liturgies for our use in the church. And like diocesan convention, it's made up of two houses, the House of Deputies, the House of Bishops. The House of Deputies is lay and clergy representatives from every diocese that have been elected at convention, elected by people who are elected by congregations. Also, the House of Bishops, as we're going to do this year coming up, right, is made up of the bishops. And bishops become bishops because a diocese at convention has elected them, as we will do in October. And then each of those bodies both elects someone to be the head, the chair of that house, the presiding officer. So either the president of the House of Deputies, currently Miss Julia Ayala Harris, or the presiding bishop, Bishop Sean Rowe, who we had visited us at convention last fall. Each house elects their own chair, and then it's confirmed by the other house. Right? And General Convention meets once every 3 years. Whatever, again, constitutional, canonical changes, resolutions they pass, it's passed by a majority in each house and of representatives who have come from dioceses. And so you have this sense where, again, authority, responsibility are handed up and sort of in quotes, and then leadership, responsibility, authority is implemented back down through the church. Take a moment and pause. First, sort of any questions about this sort of ordering of our life? Any of it ring true? Any of it surprise you?
Ellen, there's a question in the chat. Can you email these diagrams to us after the town hall?
Yes, I will. We will make this and another diagram if you'd like available. Any other questions, reflections?
I have a reflection.
Sure.
I'm Kathy Larkin from St. Paul's in Elk Rapids. And you may remember my name because way back when, and not too long ago, you invited me to become part of Creation Care program. And it's borne great fruit, not good pun intended. What has occurred to me just now as you were going through all of this, and it seems to be kind of a politically charged climate that we're living in right now anyway, it reminded me of how purposeful and organized and clear the passage of power from one to another is a sacred duty, and one which has, I don't know, validation over the centuries. And when you think of how long that has been and what humans were capable of coming up with as a way of organizing toward a holy purpose in life, it's pretty impressive. And it's comforting to know that that's not just a tradition; it is guided by holy faith and connection with God.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're right, in that handoff, and we embody that in our liturgies that at if you watch the presiding bishops in sort of service of installation as a presiding bishop a couple of years ago, the bishop was handed the primatial cross, right? That sort of symbol of office. I don't know quite how it will end up happening in the liturgy here, given the particularities of our last number of years, right? But it is not uncommon to see the outgoing diocesan bishop hand the crozier to the new diocesan bishop, right? Is that symbol of, as you talk about, sort of good order and passage from one leader to the next in authority. And even with rectors, it's not always done, but it's not uncommon that on the rector's last Sunday, sort of at the time of the dismissal, there's a short rite of closing, and the rector takes their stole off and lays it on the altar as a sign of like, my ministry here has come to a close. And when we have a celebration of new ministry, there's often sort of the presenting of the stole, again, as a sign of taking on that pastoral leadership within a congregation.
Jay has put in the chat, it might be worth noting that our bicameral organization is at least loosely based on the structure of the US government that came into being at roughly the same time.
Yes, thank you, Jay. That is one of the points, right? Many of the folks who were involved in the founding of our civil political structure were also Episcopalians. And so there is that similarity of most at the church-wide level and most of our dioceses, they have that sort of bicameral structure. I do believe, not sure if there's one that has a unicameral structure at the diocesan level, not, or if I'm just confusing that with the state. But most of them are bicameral in that way. And as with legislation in the government, both houses, both orders have to pass something in order for it to be adopted. You don't see it often at convention. You will see it this year with the election of a bishop, and it is always possible that at diocesan convention, currently at diocesan convention, most of our things get voted on in the whole, but there is a legislative procedure to vote by orders, is what it's technically called. And in that case, as is always the case when we elect a bishop, the clergy of the diocese and the lay delegates vote separately. And there has to be a majority in both orders in order for the election or the resolution to be adopted or passed. Now, within it, and I did go past a little quick, but it's next, I want to talk about the relationship between the rector and the vestry as a whole. And I say the vestry as a whole because we have a shortened phrase, which is rector and vestry. But that's actually sort of a misnomer. It is shorthand because the rector is a member of vestry. The vestry is not separate from the rector. If you look at our diocesan canons, in there it says, the vestry shall not transact any business without the awareness of the rector, priest in charge, or pastoral leader of the congregation, or if the office of the rector, priest in charge, or pastoral leader is vacant, without the presence of one of the wardens. No action affecting the rights of the rector, priest in charge, or pastoral leader shall be taken away at any meeting at which the rector, priest in charge, or pastoral leader has not been given opportunity to attend. That's in our diocesan canons. Also, both in our diocesan canons and in the church-wide canons, they both specifically mention that the rector presides at all vestry meetings unless they choose to delegate to the senior warden or another member. So the rector is a member of vestry, so that if we really wanted to be precise, when we would say the rector, either rector and lay members of vestry or rector, wardens, and lay members of vestry, because the rector and the wardens are not separate from the vestry, they're a part of it. The rector is a full voting member. Now, because of Robert's rules, when the rector usually is presiding, it is the practice that they do not vote unless there's a tie. But that has to do with them chairing the meeting, not with them being a priest. And so if the rector delegates chairing the meeting to a senior warden, say, then the senior warden would only vote if there was a tie, and the rector would vote. And with this sense of the rector being a part of vestry, it's important for us to sort of talk about accountability And um, sorry, I went to do this the wrong way. Accountability and what's the relationship between the rector and the lay members of vestry? Because again, the Episcopal Church, we have a particular unique model that we don't experience elsewhere. A unique model when we live fully into it. I will say there are times and ways that we don't live into what we understand to be the way we ought to be. But so in this top model that you see here on the screen now, it's sort of the vestry is an advisory board, right? We see this, the Roman Catholic Church, my understanding, with their pastor's advisory committee or council, right? That council provides advice, might be an implementation body. This can also be lived out in sort of what we would traditionally refer to as sort of a father knows best model, right? Where it's like whatever the priest wants, the vestry says yes. And again, the vestry gets in practice reduced to advisory and an implementation team. But I want to say clearly that is not our model. Right? The vestry is a single whole body, priest as rector, and the elected lay members. The other thing that things can sort of get in trouble is, and places we differ is our vestry does not function like a nonprofit board or a more congregationalist model where you have a board of directors and an executive director or senior pastor that reports to the board, right? Where the board has sort of the power and authority, and then decisions are then sort of handed off to the rector or the executive director to implement. That's not our model either. And it can be difficult sometimes when folks who have a lot of experience in the nonprofit world come in and presume that that model sort of translates to the way that we operate. The genius of the Episcopal Church when we function at our best is that we live in a place of mutual accountability. So you have rector, you have wardens and lay vestry members who do have some unique specific responsibilities. But when we speak of vestry, we're talking about this overlapping portion of the Venn diagram, that it is in collaborative working together and that the vestry exists. And there's this dynamic cycle of mutual accountability. The rector is accountable to the lay members of vestry, doesn't report to them, but is accountable to them. And in the same way that the lay members are accountable to the rector, right? They don't report to, they don't serve at the pleasure of, but there is mutual accountability. We live this out, this sort of mutual accountability. Every rector's letter of agreement speaks that there'll be an annual mutual ministry review. Now, please hear the title. It is a mutual ministry review. It is not a performance review. Now, the practice in a lot of places is these are not done, unfortunately, until that time when the lay members of the vestry are really upset with the rector. And then they call the diocesan office and they get one of us and they say, we want you to come do a mutual ministry review because we have a problem with our rector here. And what they're really saying is, we want you to come do a mutual ministry review because we don't like our rector and we want to fire him and we need the paper trail now. That is not what the mutual ministry review is. The mutual ministry review, I'll stop. Yes, Jim. You're on mute. You need to unmute, Jim.
I just went through our annual meeting notes and I looked at the vestry members, and our rector is not listed as a vestry member. And what I'm hearing you saying is that he or she is supposed to be a vestry member.
That's correct. Again, we sort of shorthand it, and when we think of vestry members, we can think of vestry members as the lay members who are elected to vestry or elected as wardens. And we speak of rector and vestry. But if we're going to be sort of precise in our language, and definitely the way we should be living it out, the rector is a full voting member, and in fact, by canon, is the president. They chair the vestry meetings. It is always their prerogative to lead the meetings. Like I said, they can delegate it, but by their full voting members, president of vestry.
So when I'm done here, the next time I see my rector, I'm going to say, why aren't you listed as a vestry member?
Right? Fair question. I expect they might say, I don't know, probably because that was the way the annual report has always been written. And like I said, again, most of the time it's an innocent shorthand. It gets into trouble sometimes because people have heard it enough and they have another model in mind, so they do think of the rector as separate. And so I'm not telling you that you should stop referring to rector and vestry. I just think it is important for us to be aware that shorthand, that in fact our model is, because again, at one level, it gets cumbersome to always say rector wardens and lay vestry members, right? So we abbreviate things. We're good at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So the mutual ministry review, and there are different ways that it gets done. There are different formats for doing it. But the goal of the mutual ministry review is to have intentionality, communication that strengthens the leadership team. And so at its base, in a mutual ministry review, the rector, wardens, and lay members of vestry, as a minimum, do a both self-reflection and reflection on others about the rector, the wardens, and the vestry as a whole at the same time. Now, clearly, the performance of the past year or whatever span of time informs this review. It's not that it's separate from performance, but the mutual ministry review is forward-looking, right? And so it is about what do we need to do individually in each of our respective roles and collectively over the coming year. How do we either strengthen our work or how do we be intentional about recognizing we're at a different phase, right? So we may need something different from the rector or the wardens or the vestry as a whole because they have a growing edge, or we may need it because we're all of a sudden going to be doing a capital campaign this year and we weren't doing a capital campaign last year, right? Or we're starting this large scale new ministry of some sort that we didn't do the last year. Or, we used to have more staff than we do now. And so the vestry has to act right differently. So there are any number of reasons that in the mutual ministry review, you say of the rector, the wardens, or the vestry as a whole, here's what we need from you in the new year that we didn't have before. Right? Typically,
there's a question in the chat about mutual ministry reviews.
Okay.
Asking if there's a template for one.
There are a couple templates, and the easiest thing I will say about that is to contact either me or any member of the diocesan staff, particularly your staff liaison, and we will not only help you find a template, but someone to facilitate that. Most likely one of us on staff, but if we may also have some other folks who are trained to facilitate mutual ministry reviews. It's really important to have someone from the outside come and facilitate. It's hard to do this kind of reflective work to be both facilitator and one of the members. So it's great to have someone come in from the outside to facilitate the conversation. Typically, when I do it, there are sort of three sets of questions that I have folks answer about each of the three groups. What's gone well, we'll say in the last year. What's gone well in the last year? What are some sort of growing edges that you see in this individual person or group? And what do you need? What are the priorities for this person in the coming year? And again, that sense of priority can be about a growth edge, even something that's a deficiency, just something that's a high priority. It may be that they're already doing a lot of it and focus on it, but it's important to name it's still an important focus for the coming year. Or thirdly, again, there might be something new this year that's different from last year that needs to be a priority. And what I have folks do is they answer all these questions, and then we bring all the raw data back into the room, and we have folks talk through it. And particularly when we talk about the priorities, come to some collective shared agreement about what are the priorities for the rector, the wardens, and the vestry as a whole for the coming year. Because then the other thing that happens when you develop a good discipline of regular annual mutual ministry reviews is last year's mutual ministry review informs the new one, right? It's like, okay, well, you identified these priorities for the rector, wardens, and lay vestry members, vestry as a whole. Did you meet them? And what's changed? Right? So that's sort of a rough general template. And again, like I said, whoever comes to facilitate it will help you with that. Al, I see you have a question.
Yeah, it sounds to me like this is not a stipulated annual activity like one would do in a nonprofit or in a corporate situation. And if I take that one step further, it sounds to me like you only do this when you're in trouble.
So, so the too often the practice is yes, it only happens when folks feel like the rector's in trouble. The letters of agreement for I don't know how many years, at least the 4 of the last 6 years when I've been on diocesan staff, which means longer than that. Angela or Tracy could even go farther back, probably, right? They've always been in the letter of agreements. And the sad reality, it is a standard and an expectation that too often exists on paper only.
It sounds like a pretty laborious activity.
Well, I would say it takes a couple hours ahead of time and then a couple hours on at a facilitated conversation vestry retreat. It takes some time. It takes some time, not a lot. I mean, I wouldn't call it laborious myself, but it's just the challenge we have, and I'll talk about this another place. The challenge we have is, particularly given the size of many of our congregations, there are a lot of crises. There are a lot of needs, there are a lot of expectations, and a mutual ministry review, particularly to develop the discipline of doing it annually, is important, but not urgent. And things that are important and not urgent slip down the to-do list because the urgent crowds out the important, right? And the lived reality of this, I heard someone once say there actually needs to be a third category, which is the important but not urgent yet. Right. And so the lived reality in that phone call is the experience of it's always been important. It's never been urgent till now. And now it's urgent. Right. And so what I say to you at this point as you're starting a year is, okay, when did you last do a mutual ministry review with your rector? And if it wasn't a year ago, then here's a time for you all to say, we need to do a mutual ministry review. Why don't we plan now that we're going to do it at the end of the program year? Let's get in touch with our diocesan staff representative and get on their calendar to schedule it, right? Because we work towards deadlines. And so if you set a deadline now and say, this is when we're going to do it, you'll live into that reality. The other thing that I say, and this is where it sort of dovetails with stewardship, is um, growth is rarely accidental. It takes intentionality. No one of us gets up out of bed and says, I'm going to be a scratch golfer today. None of us gets up and says, I'm going to cook like Julia Childs this evening for dinner, never having really cooked or studied to cook, right? None of us says, oh, I'm going to be fluent in a foreign language when I go on vacation this summer, right? It takes intentionality. We need to set goals. So how are we going to set goals to be mutually accountable? How are we going to set goals how we want to grow this year, right? So it's always been important. It's been in our letters of agreement for many years. We just need to be faithful in prioritizing it because in and of itself, it doesn't feel urgent. Dorothy.
Unmute myself. I was just going to say, I mean, communication. I mean, basically, to me, that's it in a nutshell. If you communicate and you're doing it quarterly, biannually, annually, and you can discuss the problems instead of waiting until you're at a point of unhappiness. That to me, communicating what's going good, what's not going good. It's lack of communication or communication. When we used to do quarterly reviews instead of waiting for the years, you can kind of, if there's things you can tweak, then you could tweak it before it gets to become a huge problem.
Right, right. A mutual ministry review is a way to have that intentional communication you're talking about. Right? Because particularly like there could be, if it's about negative things or things not being done, it's easy to think again, I'll have that conversation or, irrationally wise away. Oh, it's not that bad, I guess, right? Or I don't want to be that person, so I'll bury it. And a mutual ministry review says, here's a non-anxious time to talk about what's working and what's not working, right? And to see what's going on. Catherine. Catherine, were going to? Catherine Larkin, were you going to say something?
She can't find her unmute. I sent her
There we go.
There you
Okay.
go.
It's like I don't have a mouse, and which is probably why it takes long. Anyway, I wanted to say that every year that I've been in Vestry, the value of what you're saying is really spot on, as they say, because for me, it has been a tradition that the Vestry at St. Paul's does this mutual review. And we are given an opportunity to do some drilling down, so to speak, in condition of the church, our congregation, who's in our congregation, how are our finances, every aspect that's sort of not the nuts and bolts, but the pieces that make or break a church doing well and having active participation in their community. It's just part of what we do. So it isn't like, oh my gosh, we haven't done one in 3 years. We all of a sudden have to. And you get this anxiety about it because it becomes urgent in your own mind instead of just traditional. It is very important, but it isn't urgent. It's important because it's a a habit of mind to do reflection on how you're doing when you have a special responsibility. And, I'm a teacher, and so we do it all the time. We meet once a month as a team, and we look at student work, and we know what our job is and what we're teaching and how are we doing. And the best measurement we have is of the work that the kids are producing and the quality of the communication we have amongst ourselves as professionals. So it's a great experience. It's a serious one, but you get the sense you really, for me, it's been great because now I think I'm beginning to really know St. Paul's rather than just showing up. And it's really helpful.
Thank you, Catherine.
Mhm.
So now that we have sort of a sense about, again, sort of authority and responsibility in the Episcopal Church, this unique, collaborative, mutually accountable, dynamic relationship between rector and lay vestry members, I want to talk a little bit about the responsibilities, the roles, and the opportunity for the vestry. I want to say I love vestry. I love vestry meetings and the potential they hold, because the vestry has a unique position in the life of the congregation. The vestry is the one body that looks in two different directions, that any other body in ministry in the congregation doesn't. One is the vestry is the one body in the Episcopal Church in the congregation that looks horizontally across all of the ministries of the church. Right? Each ministry, right? Children's ministry, hospitality, any of the worship ministries, right? They're focused on that particular task, that particular function. The vestry is the only one who has participation from many of those groups. They're the only one asking the question, how are things going in the parish? What do we need to focus on as a congregation, right? And so they're not only looking sort of in the horizontal plane across the whole congregation, they're also the only body that's positioned to say, where are we going to be in 3, 5, 10 years? What do we need to be thinking about now to live into the future? Where are we going? What's our direction? And so I really want to encourage you as you begin this year to think about these sort of strategic qualities, because again, particularly when as we were talking about with the mutual ministry review, it's really easy for a vestry's time to be sort of consumed on nuts and bolt details. Like important, right? But it's like, what's the latest project and how's that getting done? And especially in our smaller congregations where many of the doers and the leaders of doers find themselves on vestry, right? It becomes sort of the leadership body of the whole. And if anything is going to happen, it's going to be by the individuals who are on vestry. And so one of the things that you need to think about in structuring vestry meetings is how do you preserve the space, the time, and energy to think and talk strategically? Because it's so important, but it's not in the moment urgent, right? So it's the same conversation we just had. The urgent of the next task, the next deadline, the next report that's due, whatever that might be, can really crowd out taking the time to talk about where are we going? How is the community in which our congregation sits? How are they changing? What do they need? How do we think about what's something new we might be doing? What's a big project that we might sort of take on that can both connect us to the community, it can use the resources we have. All right, those strategic conversations are important for the vestry to have because they're the only body that can have it. Right? The altar guild's not going to be talking about where is the congregation going to be going 10 years from now. They might worry about it, right? But they don't have the positional responsibility and authority to chart the course. It's the vestry that has that. And so I will say as a practice, one of the things that I do both when I've been the interim rector and leading vestry meetings, and even in our staff meetings here as a diocesan staff, is have the strategic conversation as the first thing on your agenda. Say, we're going to take 20 minutes and we're going to talk about this strategic question, whatever it is, and then get to the treasurer's report and the building report and the junior warden's report and this report and that report. Because if you flip the order, you're going to find that your effective hours of meeting as a vestry get burned through with the urgent, and you get to the end, you're like, well, we'll talk about the strategic stuff at the next meeting. And that's always when it takes place, at the next meeting. So I encourage you as a vestry, even again, in the small congregations, the more that you can empower folks who are not on vestry to take a leadership role in the implementation and preserve, either by that delegation and empowerment or by the way you structure your vestry meetings, to make sure that your vestry is filling its strategic role. Right? You don't see that strategic role in one sense sort of in the canons as an enumerated thing, but it's so important not only to the life of the vestry, but to the life of the congregation. Because otherwise we end up tending to fall into mechanical patterns of repeating and crisis management. And we limit the growth, we limit new energy, we limit new possibilities. Any questions about that? Or anyone have any experience of how your vestry has in the past or currently creates space, receives new life from doing this strategic work? Jim.
Okay. You may have said this earlier, but this transcript that's being seen at the bottom, is this going to be put in a written form and passed on to each one of us through an email?
If you are, I am not seeing sort of on mine. If there's, so my words be coming out and writing like subscript. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah. See, I'm seeing it's transcript of everything that's being said. Um, and that's what I'm wondering, is that going to be published for us to have?
I don't know if one of my other staff members know. I'm not sure about the transcript, but what I will say is this meeting's being recorded and it will be a resource that you can go back and watch or you can show with your vestry. So like if your full vestry is not here and you want to have a vestry retreat, either lead it later this month, this spring, or even next year's vestry, right? There will be this presentation is being recorded and the link to it will be available for everybody to watch.
And when will that be available? I'm sorry.
We will be able to turn that around within the next couple days to week. If it doesn't make it out into publication, email me, Alan, ALAN, at greatlakesepiscopal.org, and I'll get you a copy of the link if you need it before you see it in a publication.
Okay, but so this link is going to be sent out then in an email.
Yes, we will publish the link.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Jay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the underscoring of the strategic work of the vestry. It's kind of interesting to me that it hasn't found its way into sort of canonical descriptions of vestry responsibilities because more and more, I think that's exactly what vestry deliberations ought to be about rather than what they have often been about. Um, and I just wanted to say, I feel really blessed at All Saints because we've got a few corporate folks and nonprofit folks on our vestry who developed over the last couple of years an actual strategic plan for the parish, a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. I have not seen that done in that way in a parish before, and it's actually really invigorating and inspiring because it sets an agenda then for our vestry meetings. It's not Vestry meetings now are not going to be just sort of reviewing reports, as you mentioned, Alan. It's actually going to be, okay, where are we with the strategic plan? What do we need to do better? Do we need to adjust our focus for the next 2 years in order to meet our 3 year goal? I think it's going to be a much more productive route. And it's only taken me 37 years of ministry to get here. So that's, but anyway, I just wanted to underscore how important I think that aspect is that you just brought forward. So thank you for that.
And if I can ask Jay, would it be correct to say that when you leave a vestry meeting having had those strategic conversations, that your energy level is higher as opposed to when you have a vestry meeting that is all nuts, bolts?
Absolutely. Because um, I suppose this isn't necessarily true for every kind of strategic conversation, but generally speaking, I would say when you're engaged in strategic deliberations with each other, you're really trying to address not only the needs of the parish, but how, as you mentioned, Alan, how the parish is trying to meet the needs of the wider community. And then you're right, it is energizing because that's what we're called to do as God's people in the world. So we're actually having that conversation, which is great.
Yeah. Sue Redden?
I was just gonna uh say I'm the senior warden at Hastings and Manual, and we start off our new vestry with a retreat and do a planning on that day. And I like the idea of doing starting your meetings with a strategic conversation because I think sometimes that gets pushed back. And so I look forward to hoping that we can do that in our meetings.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sue. And Susan?
I'm from Holy Trinity. This is my second term on the vestry. I was clerk for the first 3 years, and now I'm senior warden. And I want to thank the people that worked hard on the holy ground for whole communities, because what I saw, I think one of our delegates, I was a delegate, but the other delegate got very excited when he heard about the Holy Ground for Whole Communities presentation and brought it back. And it just seems like it changed. And now our vestry, I think that strategy thing is like, here was something that people really started getting exciting about. And there's just been like a shift in energy and moving us away from kind of like kind of stuck in this. We're a really small parish with a average attendance of like 15 to 20, maybe 10 sometimes in the winter, but it just kind of brought some energy and people are excited. And I see that shift going on. So I'm very grateful for the people that worked hard at that whole process.
Good. Thank you. Other questions or reflections on this sort of strategic role? So now I want to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts piece, because again, as much as I value the strategic, there are some specific things that it's important for Vestry to do to understand um, the the responsibility and authority they have. And so these are going to be all stuff that I'm citing from canons. That way I have it here. You can pull down the citation or for future reference if need be. So financial, building, temporal issues, and broad-based strategic planning are the purview of the whole vestry, not the priest alone. Again, this is that mutual accountability and work together. The technical language in our church-wide canons, the vestry are the agents and legal representatives of parish in all matters concerning its corporate property, the relations of the parish to its clergy. So the vestry, when you talk about signing contracts, when you talk about investing money, endowment or financial reserves, that's the role and the responsibility of the vestry to make those decisions, vestry as a whole. In accordance with the constitutions and canons, this is from our local canon, diocesan canons. In accordance with the constitutions and canons of the Episcopal Church and of this diocese, the vestry shall govern the congregation and shall manage and be responsible for its property and material affairs, and shall, in collaboration with the clergy, further the temporal and spiritual welfare of the congregation, shall provide a suitable place of worship and see it is supplied with all things necessary to the worship of Almighty God, shall have the authority to select and call the rector and provide for the remuneration of the rector, and shall present to each annual meeting a report on its work during the preceding year and a budget for the next year. So we often talk, again, sort of in shorthand fashion. The vestry is responsible for things temporal, material, and the priest is responsible for things spiritual. Again, that's simplified because it's after overlapping, right? That, the priest should beware who tries to change things in the liturgical service too much, or the scheduling of what time worship happens, without building buy-in and communication with the vestry and the leadership of the congregation, right? Yes, it is the authority of the rector to determine what happens in the liturgy, things spiritual, but not to take place in a vacuum or isolation. And the vestry as a whole considers things material. And because the rector only has one vote, they participate in it, but it's the authority and the responsibility of the whole vestry to make those decisions. The other thing that I want to sort of make clear about episcopal polity, because this is not true everywhere, notice it says in the last sentence of that last paragraph, report on the work during the year preceding and a budget for the next year. One of the places that congregational life is different from diocesan life is the vestry approves the budget. The operating budget is not put up for a congregational vote. It's voted on by the vestry. That's because the vestry's been given that authority and responsibility in the bylaws, in the canons, in the life of the church. It is important for them to present it. They present the budget to be transparent. Money things are not to be sort of hidden behind, an opaque facade. It's important for the whole congregation to know what's going on financially. But it is the authority and the responsibility for approving an operating budget lies with the vestry. Specifically, the wardens shall see the financial obligations of the congregation are met, and the buildings belonging to the congregation are kept in good repair and are adequately insured. Again, so the approving a budget, financial management oversight, ensuring proper civil and church reporting, again, on finances and other sort of statutory requirements. Also to ensure the best practices according to diocesan policy and the business methods in church affairs to make sure those things are being followed and lived out. I do want to say that tomorrow you should be receiving definitely sort of the clergy, the wardens. I'm not sure if it's going to all vestry members. I'll have to double check on that. And maybe Angela or Tracy might remember. We have a new diocesan policy manual that includes all of the required policies for all congregations to follow, things that are required, that are diocesan policy, like affecting diocesan staff or diocesan ministries, that the churches, congregations can use as a template. The policies themselves may not be required of congregations, but you can use them. And various other policies of, sort of bishop stipulated sort of policies, say, for instance, what is expected by the ecclesiastical authority for priests who are going to officiate at a wedding of someone who is divorced with a former living spouse. So all those, because of the effort of council, all of those various policies are being collected into one place so you can simply find them. I will say it is a long document. So if you need some help in sleeping, you can open up and start on page 1. It's about 180 pages, I think. But the beauty is it's a hyperlinked table of contents, so you can find what you want and go to that policy. Also, as those policies get added to or updated, all of them will go into that one specific file, so you always know where you can find the current version. And I encourage you to think about that in your work as a vestry, how you gather all of your congregational policies and practices into one place. Because, again, historically, one of the challenges that we have at all levels of the church, at least diocesan and congregational, is the vestry or council approves a policy and it's in that year's vestry binder. And as long as you still have that group of vestry members and that rector present, you might know about it. But definitely once all those change, all of a sudden then it's a paper in a file in a binder somewhere. And so again, to think about how to use electronic tools and data storage to gather all of your church policies into one place so that you can have the continuity of using them and knowing what needs to be updated. And if you haven't taken a look at your bylaws since 1986, you might take a look at them again and you'll know where they are. So enough on that sort of tangent. Any questions? I want to touch on 3 sort of last things that are good for you all to know. These are in our diocesan canons. Regular meetings of vestry shall be held at least 6 times per year. All vestry members are expected to be present. So that's the minimum number. You don't have to meet monthly, but you do need to meet 6 times a year. Electronic and hybrid meetings and votes and actions taken within them are valid and acceptable. So it is permissible to have a hybrid meeting or an all Zoom meeting for business. You don't have to be in person. You can take a vote through email. I would say it would be very important for you to set ahead of time. Here's the practice. Here's how we make sure everyone gets the information. Here's how much time advance notice is given, so forth and so on. But I want you to know, particularly in the wake of all that happened during COVID lockdown, that it is possible to continue to meet and do business electronically, which again is really nice to think about. For a long time, one of the challenges for churches with large snowbird populations was that group said, well, I can't be on vestry because I'm going to be in X place for 3 to 6 months. That's now not an issue. That they can, if there are active members in the parish and you want them on vestry and they're in Florida or the Carolinas or something for the winter months, they can participate via Zoom on the vestry meetings. I will say that for the year that I was interim here at Grace in Grand Rapids, one of our vestry members and the president endowment board was getting his graduate degree in Norway. And he was present for every meeting. the beauty of Zoom. So, so know that that is something that's allowable. It's interesting. I hadn't seen this until I was reading through the canons. This is now a diocesan canon about attendance and continuing membership on vestry. If any member of the vestry is absent from 3 consecutive meetings without due cause, as determined by the rector, priest in charge, or pastoral leader and the wardens, that seat shall be declared vacant. So there is a sort of attendance requirement and a means for someone being removed from vestry for failure to participate. I'll say it's the first time I've ever seen that in canon, right? So there's always sort of tension when looking at bylaws. What's the vestry norm? How do we do it? What do we do? So I just wanted to alert you in, because I don't believe this was in the canons beforehand, but now in the canons of the Episcopal Diocese of the Great Lakes, there is this clause that is binding for all members of our congregation, all congregations in the diocese.
There's a question in the chat. Where's the link to the 2025 parochial report?
I know, I believe, I think that's been sent out already. I don't have at the tip of my memory here how I could get that. If you will email to me that request for the link, I will make sure that it gets to you. And again, my email is Alan, ALAN, at greatlakesepiscopal.org.
I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. Other questions? Everyone feel oriented and excited and ready for your first vestry meeting? Anything you wish I would have covered or wish that we might cover in the future? So I want to thank you then for your time. I also want to say that as you think about doing your work, not only around mutual ministry reviews, but if you're thinking about having a vestry retreat and you'd like to have an outside person come in and help lead that retreat, again, please be in touch with me or any of the members of the diocesan staff, and we can have a conversation about whether it makes sense for one of us to help facilitate that, or if there's someone else that we might find who would be appropriate for your particular context and what you're hoping to get out of that vestry retreat to facilitate that retreat. Again, we are not only as a diocesan staff, but we as a diocese, right? We're here to collaborate and help one another. So the one thing I definitely want you all to leave with is you're not alone in this work. Dorothy.
Hey, Alan, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask this. In smaller congregations, and I guess I should say, how is the work if sometimes you have to not rotate off people that are been like more than 2 consecutive runs? Or is there like, do we get fired, or how does this all? I mean, I the only way we're going to make it all run is to sometimes it's going to be that there's some of us are staying on longer than we, than 2. We're
So
trying.
you're gonna ask me while this is being recorded whether you have to follow the canons?
No, I'm just saying is it
Look,
common that happens occasionally?
um,
I know it's best not to.
I don't know whether to say it's common. It is not unheard of, and I think to be in conversation again with members of the diocesan staff to talk about what one might do, right? Again, there is reason for sort of best practices and having rotation. It's why we have the the canons that we do, right? I think the other thing, again, if you haven't done this, although you might, right, which is, one of the things might be, are you at the minimum number of vestry members, right? That, sometimes the number of folks who are on vestry is based on a day when we had more people in the congregation, right? So say, for instance, you're at 12 or 15 because you used to be a large congregation. You're not as large a congregation. Nothing says you can't, reduce the number down to 9 or 6. I think I should know
I
this.
think it's 6. I
Is
think
it,
it's 6, but I
is it,
thought it used to be 7, but I
yeah,
think I just filled out the report thing and
yeah,
there's 6 spots listed.
right, right. So, yes. So I think, are there times, are we aware, are there times that are folks not rotating off? Yes. Is it canonical or ideal? No. Is it reality when we have small, thriving congregations that are small? That is true. And so, again, I think being sort of conversation, and we're all on the same team.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions or comments?
Stephanie put a link in the chat for the parochial report, reports.dfms.org/login. I'll put it in the chat again so that it's just right at the bottom and you can just copy the whole link.
Oh, thank you very much. And again, I know parochial reports change too frequently. So if you have any questions in trying to fill them out, please be in touch with your diocesan staff liaison or any of us on diocesan staff to help you get that completed.
Thank you. It's been very informative.
Good. I'm glad, Russ. I appreciate that. Last call for questions or comments. Then may the peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and of his Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you this night and remain with you always. Amen. Thank you for your time and your generosity and service. Bye-bye.